So here's something I've learned in ministry, something that 28-year-old didn't know, and that is that the time of life that we call dying, when death is inevitable, the patient debilitated, the family already grieving what is to come, that time of life can be rich for all concerned, in spite of the discomforts of medical care and the pain of illness. It can be a time of frank conversations, of loving care, of reconciliation and forgiveness, of stories remembered and shared. It can be a time of endings and beginnings for everyone. It's not always good. Sometimes the time of dying is a time of emergency management of an overwhelming medical condition. Often in those cases, the patient is too ill to participate or communicate. Sometimes the time of dying is lonely and prolonged. Sometimes it brings out not love but conflict in a family. Sometimes the medical establishment, bumbling along in its prevent dying at all costs sort of way, tortures the dying and the family. That happens less and less, and it's entirely preventable, but it's everybody's nightmare. Today's speakers, three of us, have three different perspectives on how to make the time of dying as good as it can be.
Good morning. My mother died from cancer when I was just 17. She had been ill most of my life, and my father and I had been her caretakers. A few years later, my father died from a blood clot after emergency surgery for a detached retina. He had been out dancing the night before. Both of these death experiences had a tremendous impact on me as a young adult and started my lifelong interest in different ways to die. I have come to believe that I have certain rights related to my own death. Unfortunately, the state of New Mexico and much of the country do not support what I believe to be my rights. However, that has not stopped me from formulating my preferences and speaking out in support of what I espouse. That's why I read Being Mortal, joined the Committee on Conscious Aging, and am standing in front of you this morning. I have lived a good life, and I would like to live a good death. With that in mind, here's my vision for my demise. Since I won't necessarily know that death is imminent, it's my responsibility to prepare as best I can. That includes having a will, an advance directive, a disposition of property, and instructions for disposition of my body. I'm almost, but not quite there yet. A major task not yet tackled is cleaning out my house. And I have come to believe that one of the best gifts we can give our families is to clean out the house. And I see all these heads nodding. As I age, I would like to stay in my home as long as possible. To do that, I prefer to deal with a minimal amount of rules and regulations. I want to be surrounded by loving and caring people, including an advocate who helps me look after my best interests. If and when the time comes when I can't stay in my own home, I'd like to choose from a range of options, from a total life care community to a small group home, whatever best meets my needs at that time, recognizing that my needs are likely to change as I grow older. I want to be in charge of my course of treatment, which includes no treatment at all. I want to make the best choice without pressure from doctors, families, or friends. And if I'm incapable of making that decision, I hope my wishes, as stated in my advance directive, will be honored. In my final days, I want to remain relatively free from pain, and if I so desire, I can choose to end my life, which in my vision is legal in New Mexico, should I be terminal. My advocate remains by me to make sure my wishes are honored and that I am well cared for through palliative care or hospice. And there's something else that I envision for myself. I would like the right to terminate my life even though I may not be labeled terminal. I would like to choose an exit strategy that is supported by safeguards, not barriers. I believe there are valid reasons to choose to end life, even if one is not terminal. Perhaps my quality of life has declined. Perhaps I've finished that bucket list. Perhaps my money has run out. And perhaps I'm just worn out. Well, you say, you're asking a lot. I am, and it all won't be realized in my lifetime, but we are making progress. Our visions drive us to action, and our actions lead to change. At the end, I will have had a good death if my friends and family can say of me, just as novelist Willa Cather said of the Archbishop, that he died simply because he had lived too much.
Good morning. Last February, the Canadian Supreme Court, in a unanimous ruling, struck down the nation's law that banned doctors from providing medical aid in dying. Their ruling declared that the ban denied people the right to make decisions concerning their bodily integrity and medical care, and leaves them in enduring intolerable suffering. I was thrilled when I heard this news on NPR. Despite its decision, the court intentionally delayed the ruling from taking effect for 12 months so that legislators would have time to amend the current laws. This irritated and disappointed my friend, a Unitarian minister suffering from leukemia who lives in British Columbia. When I saw him 6 months ago, he said to me, "I am ready to die and the government is dragging its feet." But as you are probably aware, Canadians are not the only ones grappling with laws concerning an individual's right to make their own end-of-life choices. Remarkably, the first right-to-die law in the U.S. was introduced in Florida in 1967. It failed. 4 years later, however, hospice was founded. Hospice has become the premier organization to provide end-of-life comfort care and management, as well as offer respite for family and primary caregivers. Their presence has made space for the current debate on end-of-life choices, including the right of an individual to access medical aid in dying, which is essentially the subject I'm addressing today. This is a subject that has both political and personal implications for all of us. In the early 1990s, Ralph Merrow, a young UU minister in Washington State, led the charge for medical aid in dying. As the executive director of an organization called Compassion in Dying, he attended the deaths of several people who were, despite their terminal illness, both mentally and physically competent. Merrow and others interested in promoting end-of-life choices launched a state initiative in Washington to legalize the practice. Opposition from the Catholic Church defeated it. Merrow's group was not the only organization working to secure an individual's right to make end-of-life choices. The Hemlock Society was founded in 1980. Later, it became known as End-of-Life Choices. In 2005, these two organizations, Compassion in Dying and End-of-Life Choices, merged to become known as Compassion and Choices. Now it is the largest organization in the U.S. advocating for people's end-of-life rights. It has an active group here in New Mexico, of which I am a member. The current president of Compassion and Choices, Barbara Lee Combs, a UU, from Portland, Oregon, co-authored Oregon's landmark Death and Dignity Act, which went into effect in 1997. The initiative actually passed with a 60% voter approval. Supporters refer to it as compassionate, enlightened, and freeing. The law is very specific. First, the person must have a diagnosed terminal illness, and then 2 doctors must agree that he or she has less than 6 months to live, and the person must be both mentally and physically competent. This Oregon law has become the model for a number of states that now provide medical aid in dying, and they include Oregon, Washington, Montana, Vermont, and California. Approval in these states have come in various forms, through the initiative, the legislature, or the state Supreme Court. At this time, over half of all states, including New Mexico, are considering legislation guaranteeing end-of-life rights. In 2014, a terminally ill, competent New Mexican woman with advanced uterine cancer went to court with her 2 doctors to request authorization for them to prescribe medication that she could self-administer to facilitate her own peaceful death. Judge Nan Nash in 2014 ruled in this case that terminally ill, mentally competent persons have a fundamental right to aid in dying, and a portion of her statement is worth sharing. The court cannot envision a right more fundamental, more private, or more integral to the liberty, safety, and happiness of a New Mexican than the right of a competent, terminally ill patient to choose aid in dying. Nash's decision, however, was appealed by the state attorney general, who ironically came out in favor of the ruling. Overturned in appeal, it went before the state Supreme Court. Now, had the court's decision favored Nash's original ruling, this would have legalized aid in dying throughout the entire state of New Mexico. This past June, however, the 5-member court declared that there is no fundamental constitutional right to physician aid in dying in New Mexico. For the 2 out of 3 New Mexicans who favor aid in dying, this is a setback. But the judges certainly left the door open. In their words, they stated, "We respectfully acknowledge the magnitude and importance of the very personal desire of a terminally ill patient to decide how to safely and peacefully exit a painful and debilitating life. It's clear to us that such a right cannot be defined without comprehensive legislation. Several groups in New Mexico, including Compassion and Choices and the ACLU, have begun work on this cumbersome process. They are recruiting sponsors of the bill and are fine-tuning its language. They have also scheduled a lobby day in Santa Fe on February 15. But what lies at the heart of this debate? Is assistance in dying a human right or a moral wrong? Do individuals with terminal illnesses have the right to take an alternative path, or must they, as some agree, await the inevitable because it's God's will? Critical to this debate is the role of the physician. Medical aid in dying challenges our historic understanding of the physician's Hippocratic oath, first, do no harm. But this 2,500-year-old concept has been challenged as out of date and out of touch. It certainly predates the medical know-how and technology that today has the capacity to keep a body alive, and well after the spirit's desire to live has expired. Speaking to this dilemma, physician Atul Gawande has written a groundbreaking book entitled Being Mortal, which Joyce referenced, and some of you were part of the discussion group here in the church last January where we focused on it. In the book, the author explains how medicine and the medical profession has failed us, especially those with terminal illnesses. The waning days of our lives, he writes, are given over to treatments that addle our brains and sap our bodies for a sliver's chance of benefit. What he means is that physicians, both trained and committed to the process of extending life, sometimes end up treating an illness rather than the person. My sister's current situation serves to illustrate this issue. At the age of 74, she has a brain tumor and Parkinson's. The medication she takes keeps her alive. If she were to stop taking the medication, she would die in a matter of days. In one of our phone conversations, she told me that her plan was to drive off to an unknown place and die alone. I urged her to talk to her doctors and her husband, who up to this point had refused to even discuss it. Her endocrinologist and surgeons would not talk to her about end-of-life care and rebuked her attempts to discuss it. Eventually, she talked to her primary care physician, and who was receptive. She referred her to a sympathetic end-of-life medical team. She went to see this team with her husband and found that they were willing to listen and were very supportive. They assisted in writing her end-of-life directives. Her relief was evident. My sister knows that her illness is terminal, and like others facing death, this knowledge creates a terrible dilemma. To prolong life or create less suffering, what is the proper balance then between extending life or prolonging suffering? A majority of Americans believe that people in this quandary have the right to choose the circumstances of their own death. They believe this right is theirs and not in the hands of a religious group, a hospital, or a politician. Current laws generally address only those with terminal illnesses. Individuals have limited options in the way that they choose to die, unless a sympathetic caregiver in a sympathetic or a compassionate act responds to a request to speed up their loved one's departure. There are very few options other than refusing food or drink or taking one's own life, possibly by violent, dangerous means. Individuals are forced to suffer with pain and loss of bodily functions. According to Barbara Combs, writing in a Compassion and Choices letter, too few people explore end-of-life options before they face a health emergency or a terminal illness. When that happens, they find themselves thrust into a healthcare system that is structured to promote aggressive treatment and reluctant to factor quality of life into medical decisions. Endings are important in whatever we do. The one ending that we don't want to talk about is our ultimate end. Ironically, the progress medical science has achieved in extending our lives has made conversations about end-of-life issues extremely important. These conversations need to focus on the quality of life as opposed to the next best cure. Having this kind of conversation will profoundly affect the choices we make, the doctors we seek out, and the treatments we pursue. Until medical science, as I bring this to a close, has found a cure for aging, it's essential for our own peace of mind and for those we love that all of us engage in deliberate conversations regarding our end-of-life wishes, whether we're terminal or whether we're healthy. My Canadian colleague fortunately died peacefully, but at the end of his life, he was irritated by the political process rather than enjoying the relative peace my sister, on the other hand, found knowing that her end-of-life wishes are valued and respected.
I am also a proponent of carefully drawn up aid in dying laws. These laws which would allow doctors to prescribe medication which would be lethal to a patient who's terminally ill but of sound mind and able to self-administer that medication. But I'm not a particularly enthusiastic one. I am much more enthusiastic about measures to assist dying people that stay on the line of allowing death to occur rather than causing death. I am much more enthusiastic, for instance, about the hospice movement, which offers important services to patients and families, makes it so much more likely that the last days are good days for everyone. And I'm much more enthusiastic about the legislation clarifying that patients of sound mind may stop treatment, any treatment, may refuse nourishment, may be given medications for comfort even though they hasten death. And I'm enthusiastic about living wills. I am very enthusiastic about living wills, which give people the opportunity to specify their wishes in dying and require those seeing them to be legally accountable to those wishes. I have seen these documents work wonders in ICUs and emergency rooms. Once invoked, they change a frenzy of often painful, confusing activity from which loved ones are usually excluded into a space where love and care and usually peace can prevail. How many of you have living wills? Well, that's pretty good. That's a lot better than the American average, which is only 25% of Americans, but it is not good enough. If you have a living will, congratulations. The rest of you need to get a living will. I don't often tell you what you have to do from this pulpit, but this is one thing you have to do. No matter what your age or health. For as my mother always said, you could be hit by a bus tomorrow. And since she was right about that, the rest of us, and especially those who care about you, need to know what you want. So just do it. Download the form and fill it out. There's instructions in your order of service. If you don't want to appoint a personal representative, which is how they all start, just do the rest of it. Skip the stuff about nutrition and pain meds and stopping treatment. And sign it. No witnesses are necessary. And then post it on your refrigerator. Take it to your doctor. Give it to someone in your family so that they can show up in the emergency room and work magic on your behalf. Okay, end of sermon. You may know that my scripture of choice is the Tao Te Ching, that ancient Chinese wisdom which values doing things naturally, going with the flow, good or bad, and experiencing life as it comes. It is for this reason that I requested natural childbirth when the time came to have Kevin, these 26 years ago. I didn't end up with natural childbirth because that's not how that particular river flowed. But it was what I had hoped and prepared for, And I'm grateful for the several revealing, if exceedingly uncomfortable hours, that showed me a side of life I had not previously experienced. And I learned a lot from the rest of it, too. Among other things, that control over your life is an illusion that is best gotten over. As I said, I somewhat reluctantly support aid in dying. That river flows on its own way. And anyway, all this river business is my faith and not everybody's. I know that most of you support this kind of legislation more wholeheartedly than I do. And there is a time, all there is time to say today about this is that aid in dying has its downsides and its unintended consequences. And first and foremost is that the right to die can subtly morph into a duty to die. The right to die can turn easily into the duty to die, not necessarily in a legal sense, but via the emotional coercion of responsible, loving people. Even with Obamacare and Medicare, terminal illness is very expensive for families. Someone might lose their job if they have to become a full-time caregiver. This eats into inheritances and sometimes even to family financial stability. Caregiving is also very stressful. Even in families where no one would tell Dad he ought to get on with it outright, or even think such a thing, Dad himself might succumb to the financial calculus if he had a choice, or feel guilty because he didn't. I've seen it happen, and that's not a good death. It's with that cautionary experience that I look at aid in dying legislation as needing great care and thought to prevent unintended consequences, backlashes, and a lessening of the value society places on life. When we take this step, we must do it well. We should do it as a last resort, and that means after that living will. And we must continue to do all the things that we can do to make the time of dying comfortable and meaningful and affordable for patients and families. And while we're working out the details, do your part and sign that living will. So thanks, Joyce and Jim, for sharing your perspectives, both deeply a part of your lives and the way the river of life has flown for you. We don't all have to agree in this church on these big questions of meaning, and this has been a rich conversation, I hope, for us all. And now we have the special pleasure of welcoming new members into our congregation. Will the new members come forward as their names are read? And please bring along your order of service with you. You can come up on either side of the platform, steps there, ramp there.
Althea Atherton, Kelsey Atherton, Gwen Bugg. A couple of times a year, we set aside a few moments in the service to celebrate those who have recently made their membership at First Unitarian official by adding their names to the more than 5,000 others who have signed our membership book since the 1950s. If that's something you've been considering, we'd love for you to join too. You can talk to me or the membership team at the welcome table. We are recognizing 15 new members this morning, 3 with the first service and 12 at the second.
Friends, we welcome you this morning as we affirm in ceremony what you have made real in your own individual lives, which is your commitment to this congregation and all that we stand for. Outwardly, it was a very simple step. All you did was sign your name, but you came to that step by many paths. For some, it was easy. You found a group or came back to a group and you united with it. For others, the road was long, and your commitment comes at the end of a pilgrimage and at the beginning of a new life. Whatever your path, we welcome you here. Here we share insights from all humanity, Yet we each fashion that view of life that holds sense and meaning in the integrity of our own hearts and minds. We support each other in the growth and crises of our lives, rejoice together in life's passages, and share with each other the depths of our thoughts and prayers as we journey together through mystery. We encourage you to make your membership meaningful by sharing your special talents and time, financial commitment, before we all know that what we invest enriches what we receive.
Will the congregation please join me in welcoming these new members by reading the words in your order of service. With joy, we welcome you as members of this congregation. Our covenant is the love that swells the heart and opens the mind. Our practice is the tolerance that shows the larger truth. Our hope is the growth we see at the depths of our lives. Our service is to all humanity. Our community enriches our lives. With joy, we accept the gifts and responsibilities of membership and the covenant of love, respect, and service. May our connection be strengthened day by day and year by year. Together we journey forward, creating our history as a community of those who cherish an open space for the growth of the free spirit and the free mind.
Let's give these folks a hand of applause.
Please rise and body your spirit to join in singing our closing song, number 346 in the Gray Hymnal, Come Sing a Song with Me.